As you talk sports, today we're talking boxing. Proudly joined for the first time on the channel by Jamie Moore. How are you doing today, Jamie?
Hello, mate. You okay?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, thank you. So, to start off the interview, I just wanted to ask, what made you get into boxing?
Well, I think initially I was when I was about I would have been about 9, 10 years old. My dad used to sit me in the chair with him watching Nigel Benn. So he was the first sort of boxer I remember watching. Him and Mike Tyson, and then like a lot of kids, I used to love watching the Rocky films. So I was mithering my mum and dad to go boxing from about 10 years old, and there wasn't a boxing gym near us, and we didn't have a car at the time, so there was no way that I could get to a boxing gym. And then when I was 13, just a gym opened up about a mile and a half or so from my house, and that was it.
And obviously, you had a very impressive career. What would you say the highlight of your fighting career was?
Do you know what? For me, my personal sort of best achievement is probably winning the British title. I'm the only person from Salford, where I'm from, who's ever won a Lonsdale belt. There was only one British champion from Salford before me, which was 100 years to the same year before I won the British title the first time. So, you know, I won Commonwealth and European titles, and I was in Fight of the Year 3 times, and you know, I won bigger fights against fighters who were sort of higher rated, but I don't think as a British fighter in the sort of prestige what goes with the Lonsdale belt, it still means a lot, which is how it should be, you know. And it's actually just behind me. Where is it? There it is. So like that's the only one that lives in Salford. So yeah, it's probably, for me, that's the biggest achievement in my career, was winning a Lonsdale belt.
And then after your career, you transferred into coaching. What made you want to, because a lot of boxers, they go into punditry, or what made you want to go into coaching?
Well, I never wanted to, and it was never an ambition of mine. Oliver, my coach, used to always say to me, "You'll make a good coach," and I was always like, "Nah, that's not for me." I didn't really feel like I had the type of personality to do it, to be honest. And then I actually got into the punditry. I was working for Sky for a few years straight after when I first retired. So I retired 2010, and then it was 2013. Steve Wood, who I've got the gym with, he manages fighters, obviously, and he was saying to me that Tommy Coyle was looking for a new trainer. He had a big fight coming up, and would I be willing to train him to help him out? And I was like, "Oh, Steve, listen, I'm not really into that. I don't want to get involved in it." And then he just turned up in the gym one day with Tommy, just asked me to take him on the pads, and he sort of forced me into it, really. And I'm glad, because now it's sort of one of the best things I've ever decided to do. I love helping people, and I'm really enjoying it. We've had loads of success, but it really all started with Steve Wood sort of forcing Tommy Coyle up on me. He boxed Derry Matthews for the Commonwealth title, and did really well, and was winning the fight, and then Derry knocked him out in the 10th round. So that was the sort of start of it. And so that was my first fight, really, in the corner as a trainer. So straight in the deep end in a sort of title fight, outdoors in Hull. And then my second fight as a trainer was Matthew Macklin. Matthew Macklin asked me to train him, and the next thing I know, we're in Atlantic City as chief support live on HBO. So I was literally through in the deep end as a coach, and I probably was still in a fighter's mindset, where I was like, just wear your game face and pretend like it's just water off a duck's back. But inside, I was like nervous. But it's probably the best thing that ever happened to me, because it made me made me learn the ropes quick at the sort of top end, and even though I was through in the deep end, sort of managed to just sort of tread water and do okay. And then as time's gone on, it's over 10 years, like 10 years later, and we've had a lot of success with it. So yeah, it's a good decision by Steve Wood.
And obviously, you mentioned there you feel like when you got into coaching, you still had a fighter's mindset. How does it compare, like the nerves as a fighter compared to the nerves as coaching? So where you're not actually the one in the fight, but you still got the purpose of making sure your fighter gets the victory.
Yeah, I think sort of human nature kicks into a certain extent, but it's the same as fighting in the sense that the more you do it, the less nervous you get. It just becomes sort of part and parcel of what you do. So I wouldn't really say it's nerves. It's more butterflies and excitement, especially in some of the big fights. What we've been involved in recently is, as a kid, it's like I said, sat there watching fights with my dad. Would never have dreamed or imagined that I'd be involved in big fights at the highest level, at the top end of the sport. So I'm just grateful and feel blessed that I'm able to work and sort of have a job in a sport that I love, and did okay with myself in terms of an actual boxer, but I feel that the lessons I took on board as a fighter, I've been able to sort of pass on and help fighters not maybe make the same mistakes what I did, and help them achieve stuff what I could never do as a fighter. So yeah, I feel privileged.
Look, I mean, you certainly had some big achievements as a fighter, but it's interesting that you mention you would like to pass on to your fighters information that you wish that you had so they don't make the same mistakes as you. Are there any specific things or moments that happened in your fighting career that have really impacted your journey as a coach?
Yeah, I mean, my first loss, and sometimes you have to go through these things to take the lesson on board properly. So my first loss was the best thing whatever happened in my career in terms of lessons learnt from it, and I won fights after that without a shadow of a doubt I would have lost if I'd have not took those lessons on board. And sometimes, sometimes you lose fights. There's not a lot you can do about it. Sometimes the long and short of it is the other fighter is just better than you. And I I lost to Scott Dixon. I was winning the fight and I was on top, and then he just sort of toughed it out and old man me, and he in many ways he taught me how to be brave, or shown me how you had to be brave and had to tough certain situations out. And it was a big eye opener for me. I was only 21, I think, at the time, and 21, 22. And it made me grow up a lot, and I took a lot of lessons on board. And maybe the lessons what I pass on to my fighters sometimes is actually after that event's happened, and they have to go through that process and lose a fight. And I always try and sit down with them and explain to them, listen, this is what you did wrong. Sometimes you have to go through this process to understand and realise that you're doing it wrong, and in the future now you should be able to take the lessons on board and not make that same mistake again. A lot of the time it's hard to stop somebody from doing something what you can see they start doing it wrong. They don't really take the lesson. You can tell them till you're blue in the face in the gym and in sparring where there's that safety net with bigger gloves and head guards and stuff. And then sometimes they can't quite grasp it until it actually happens in a fight on the night. And then they sort of go, I understand now. I get where he was coming from. And the harsh lessons. And you have to, that's why this sport's brutal, because you have to be so mentally tough, because you've got to sort of look yourself in the mirror, be honest with yourself and go, listen, I wasn't good enough that night, but I know why I wasn't good enough. And, I've got the information now, which is going to make me better in the future as long as I put into practice what I need to do to fix that. And it humbles you. It really does. I went from being spoke about as one of the best prospects coming through in the country, big puncher, this sort of raw, strong animal coming through, then Scott Dixon humbled me, put me on my arse and show me what it was to be tough and be a real fighter. And I've said this loads of times since. I probably wouldn't have been involved in the fights I was in. And, I was involved fighting the year 3 times. The Macklin fight, people talk about the Macklin fight all the time, but the reason I was able to navigate that fight and get through the way I did, was because of some of the lessons I took on board from the loss to Scott Dixon.
And as you mentioned there, before that first loss to Scott Dixon, did you have that, like you thought you were invincible? Obviously, you mentioned that you got humbled. Is that how it was before that?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And it's embarrassing. In all honesty, it's an embarrassing situation to be in, because you put yourself on this pedestal, and part of it is sort of convincing. So you go through the amateurs and you gain confidence in yourself, in your own ability, by getting wins. But then you're thrust into a position as a professional where everyone's putting expectation on your shoulders. And, even though physically I was very mature, in my mind I wasn't as experienced or mature as I would have liked to have been. I only had 30 odd amateur fights. So I probably wasn't ready for what my body was ready for. And it was the mentality of it really what changed after that fight. And I understood Oliver Harrison was a godsend. I miss that man so much, and he really educated me afterwards about the importance of having tactics for fights, and it's not all just about toughness and fitness and durability. You have to know when to go, know when to sit back, know when to wait for your right moment. And he was a tactical genius, and those few months of me just spending the time in the gym with Oliver after that loss, and him sort of just going through little scenarios and educating me on it, it was like a penny dropped. And I understand that it was a lot more in depth, this game, than I sort of first gave it credit for.
And obviously after that loss, you dusted yourself up and you had an amazing career. And one of the biggest fights, as you mentioned, everybody loves talking about, is the fight versus Matthew Macklin. And you did eventually end up becoming his trainer. How did that relationship brew? How did that come about?
Well, obviously I retired 2010, and Matt was always sort of, he'd moved trainers a few times. He'd been back based in Manchester for a little while, and he was back training with Joe Gallagher. I saw that he was in Manchester, and I had a picture of me and him fighting what I wanted him to sign for a charity event. So I sent him a message, asked him if he wanted to meet up and could he sign this picture. And when we were sat there, we had a coffee and we had sort of some food and stuff. And he was asking me about Tommy Coyle, saying, "Oh, you did a great job with Tommy. And he looked really well. Never seen him look that good and stuff like that." And then a few days later, he just sent me a message saying, "Listen, I was wondering whether you'd be willing to come out to Marbella. I'm based over in Marbella now. I'm living over there. Would you be willing to come over and train me over there for my next fight?" And that's how it came about.
And obviously, whilst you were based over in Marbella training with Matt, obviously a bit of a serious incident happened. You were actually shot. What was it? What was that period like? How did you get through it? And do you think that your life in boxing helped you get through
it? Yeah, I do. I think I was speaking about this last week with someone actually. It's like, you don't want to remember stuff like that. It's it's traumatic, and I think when you go back to the amateurs and you think about the process of turning up at a fight and being extra nervous, and you're coming up with all these excuses at why you can't fight. I feel sick, my legs sore, my arms bad, and then eventually you go through with it, and then you win, you do really well, and you think, I was convincing myself I was going to get beat, and it was not. You sort of exaggerate everything in your mind, and you start to understand over the years that your mind can be your own worst enemy, or it can be your biggest asset. And I think what you do is you learn to put things to the back of your mind, or block out those negative thoughts. And I think that was a big part of the process of that is, the times when I would think about what happened and sort of you get you worked up, I would just sort of use those techniques, I think, from what I learned over the years of boxing, to just put it to the back of your mind and flip it, really, turn it into a positive, and like, instead of thinking about what happened, just start thinking about how blessed you are to be here, how lucky, how fortunate you are.
And then moving on, what do you prefer? Do you prefer being a boxer? Did you prefer being a boxer, or do you prefer being a coach?
It's like a double-sided coin, that. So I would do anything to be able to relive my career again, because I'd love to experience it all again. It was the greatest experience ever. It's brutal, and it's the hardest sport you'll ever do, but it creates something inside you which, no one can ever. You can't. I couldn't ever get to the stage I am in my life to be as content and feel as fortunate and as grateful as I am if I'd not been through those experiences. But I think having the success as a coach with fighters and knowing that you're helping them achieve their own goals and their ambitions is as fulfilling as it is as a fighter, but it's just in a different way. It also doesn't hurt as much. You don't get punched in the face, or rarely. You rarely get punched in the face anymore. So it's and I love seeing other people happy. I've got this weird thing, like, I don't like receiving gifts, for instance. At Christmas or on birthdays, I don't like receiving stuff. I'd much rather give somebody a gift and see their reaction. So I think that's why probably I enjoy coaching, maybe a little bit more than fighting, to be honest, because I like to see the joy it brings other people when you help them. So yeah, I don't think there's anything better than being in a position to help someone, and then it all comes to sort of fruition, and you see it all play out, and then go, wow, what a journey we've just been on. And then plus you have another 5, 6, 7 other fights in the gym, and then that's on the Saturday, and on the Monday it all starts again with a different story.
And then a bit more on the coaching now. Obviously, a couple of your fighters are coming off the back of a loss. How do you go about, recuperating them? Not letting it affect them mentally.
Yeah, I mean, probably a few of the reasons what I mentioned earlier in terms of my experiences of going through it, and how you sort of mentally, how you have to overcome it and find the positives. You've got to find the positives in the negatives, because if you don't, the first time you sort of get to that question again, you don't have the answer for it. You've got to be honest with yourself. You've got to look yourself in the mirror, and you've got to be honest why you're lost. Because too many people point the finger at other people, and a lot of the time you lose a fight because of a mistake you made. And if you're honest and hold your hands up, you go, okay, I realise what I did wrong. I know what I've got to do to fix that, and I'm going to work me bollocks off to get to the point where I've done that. So it's about being honest, and nobody likes to lose. The reason why we're all boxers is we're so competitive. But it's part and parcel of the sport, and as heartbreaking as it is, you have to be honest and accept it. And then the next part of the journey then is that rebuild and sort of proving to yourself that you can be better than you was last time. It's such a good journey. That's why I'd love to do it again. I had 5 losses in my career, and all for different reasons, but the journey afterwards, about the conversations you have in your own mind, in laying in bed at night, going to sleep, going, how did you fucking lose that fight? If I was in that situation again, I would have come through it better. How can it be better? What would I do differently? And then that process of putting that right is amazing. And you don't appreciate it at the time until you look back and you realise the lessons, and it builds mental strength, that fortitude, what you need. Where, too many people now, just something goes wrong in their life, and they're like, "Oh, I can't deal with this. It's too stressful." And I understand things are stressful, but you have to have mental fortitude where you go, right, come on now, fucking pull yourself together. You can do better. You can be better than this. You can deal with this situation. Move on with it. And boxing is probably the hardest thing to do, but I love being in a position where now we're going to be in the gym working on those maybe weaknesses or the things what they did wrong, the mistakes they made, putting that right. And then in the future, I'll see it all play out and go, wow, what a little journey we've just been on again.
And then a little bit on Chantelle. Now, obviously, I was there in the fight week. She was getting absolutely, peppered with lots of media. Do you feel like that could have possibly played a part in the fight not going her way?
I just think everything was sort of weighed towards Katie. It was orchestrated in the sense that everybody wanted Katie to win. He was around that situation, and you don't know the impact that has on other, people's decisions. The fight was close. The referee was definitely didn't do his job the way he should have done, but it was a close fight, and Chantelle can definitely do better as well. I think the cut certainly threw her off early on with the head clash. There's no way that type of cut can't have an effect on you. And also little things like I can't be in the ring after that point because Kerry has to get in the ring and deal with the cut. So having that face-to-face contact and explaining the instructions or the stuff what you need the fighter to do or want them to do, he throws it all off course. So yeah, he certainly wasn't ideal, and Chantelle doesn't like doing the media stuff anyway. So having a fight of that magnitude is never perfect for someone who likes to keep herself to herself like Shan. But if you're going to be at that level, that's what you've got to do. You've got to be doing stuff like that, and we'll see what happens. I'm not sure. I've not heard anything else other than the first few weeks where he was talking about the trilogy. I know it's something that Matchroom would probably like to do, but I haven't really heard anything about what's going to be going on. So we'll have to wait and see.
Do you know what Chantelle wants to do? Is she eager to get back in there and do the trilogy?
No, I mean, in terms of from the management point of view or the promotional point of view of Chantelle, I don't get involved in that stuff. When the fighter comes to me and says, "Listen, this fight's happening and it's going to be in so many weeks," then my brain starts doing overtime and I start going, right, what have we got to do? How long have we got to do it in? Who do we need to get sparring? All those sorts of starts to things to go. But I'm not a manager. I'm not a promoter. I just sit back and when we get a date and the opponent, I'll do my job then.
And obviously another fighter who took a loss on his last fight was Akim Fias. Obviously still a very young fighter. So much left. What do you think went wrong in his fight?
Yeah, I mean, it was a big occasion. Maybe it was a little bit too soon for him. We all thought he was ready for it. Reece Bellotti is a good fighter, and it was a calculated risk. We know he's a big puncher. I know Akim can box way better than that, and he wasn't performing the way he should have been doing. He certainly wasn't going to do it at that stage. After he got hurt and he was in trouble. The reason I threw the towel in was because I knew what he was going to do. So I've been working with him for a long time now, and he's brave. He's as brave as they come. He was going to stand there and trade with Bellotti and got try and just go for it, and it was only going to end in a bad way for him. And I saved him from that, because if it would have ended the way I thought it was going to happen, then a lot of the time the mental scars what come with that, they're really difficult to get over, and I wouldn't want him to have to try and overcome that. It's better that he sort of dusts himself off, goes back to the drawing board, analyses it, realises the mistakes he made, puts them into practice, and then we fix them in the future. And he hasn't got those psychological scars of, maybe getting knocked out badly and stuff like that, because Reece Bellotti is the type of puncher who can do that to you. And, he lives to fight another day. He can certainly perform way better than he did that night. And I still believe he can beat Reece Bellotti. I've no doubt in my mind he can do it. I'd love for him to get that fight in a couple of fights time after his, a couple of rebuilding fights where he has a couple of camps under his belt and he works on the stuff he needs to work on. And then I'd love for him to go for that again.
And as you mentioned, you did throw in the towel. Is that a conversation that you have with your fighters before the fight? Because obviously we see some fighters say, my coach will never throw in the towel. Deontay Wilder springs to mind. Do you have a conversation with your fighters to say, if it's not going your way, I need to put your health first?
No, but generally, everyone who trains with us would I would never have a conversation about a specific fighter, but we all know the conversation is in the corner. If I make the call to throw the towel in, then I'm making it in your best interest. It's not being made for any other reason or only to protect you. So I don't care whether you're upset with me. I understand fighters get upset with the coaches for doing it because that's why they're so competitive. But my decision in that split second can't be made on whether the fighter is going to be upset with me or not. Yeah. It's got to be for the health of the fighter in his best interest. And I'd thrown the towel, and then the bell went, and then I think the reaction was he thought I was going to allow him the minute in the corner, but I'd already made the decision, and I wasn't going to change my mind, and I've no regrets about it because, as I said, I know what Akim's like. He's brave as they come, and he was hurt, not badly hurt, but he was hurt, and he was the way he was fighting, and a reaction to him getting dropped and being hurt was the reason I stopped the fight. It wasn't just because he was hurt; it was because of the way he was fighting as well. He wasn't doing the tactics for what he should have been doing in the fight. He wasn't doing from the start. So, but it wasn't just based on him being hurt as well.
And another one of the fighters that you've got, Jack Caterall, a very nice performance against Jorge Linares. Obviously, a very experienced fighter. What's next for Jack? Obviously everybody wants that Josh Taylor fight. Is that what's next, or?
Yeah, I mean they're in talks. Hopefully that fight can be next. I know both guys want it, and they're in advanced talks for it to take place early this year now. So fingers crossed they can get over the line with it and it can be announced soon.
So obviously I think the whole boxing world is in agreement that they felt Jack should have won that. Does that also, having a fight not essentially robbed from you, does that have a mental effect on a fighter?
Listen, it's not easy, but again, you just have to deal with it. Similar to a loss, or even sometimes a win where you don't perform that well, and you have to sort of go back to the drawing board and analyse yourself. The thing with one where everyone thinks that you've won and you don't get the decision is that you do all the hard work and you perform the way you want to, and you still don't come out with the rewards that you deserve. So, but Jack, I've said this many times. I've never met a fighter as dedicated and as professional as him, and he's actually getting better because Matchroom have been brilliant with him and they've kept him active. So he's boxed regularly now, which he's not done for a couple of years before that. You can actually see he's getting better now as well. So it's a scary thought, and he's always been the same. He always performs better against better opposition. And Josh Taylor, I know he lost to Lopez, but Lopez is a phenomenal fighter. So that's not that. There's no indication in that fight that you think he's sort of past his best or not as good as he was. It could just be that he lost to a better fighter on the night. So we've no doubt that we're going into this fight knowing that Josh is, we're taking it as Josh Taylor is the same Josh Taylor as the one we went in with the first fight 2 years ago nearly. And and Jack will be well prepared for it, as he always is.
Definitely. And rounding off a little bit, are there any coaches that you particularly admire?
That's a good question. Do you know, I always sort of Adam Booth. I've got a lot of respect for Adam. I think he's done a really good job over the years. I've always been a big fan of his. And the only one that comes to my mind straight away is Oliver. My coach Oliver. I didn't even realise it, but when he had me get my corners licence when I was British champion in 2004, and he said, just jump in the corner with us, and you'll learn a lot in the corner. And he was right, and maybe he was even sort of trying to get me to learn the ropes then, and it was like an apprenticeship for me to be a coach without even understanding. But there's so many coaches out there. You could sit in and have a list of legendary coaches who you could talk about. But I've got to be honest with you. I'm not the sort of person who sits here and watches boxing and analyses coaches to see what they do to try and get tips and stuff like that. That's not the way I do it. I've basically coach fighters off my experience in boxing. I've been in the game for 30 years now, and I just go off my experiences and my knowledge and what I know, and I just have trust in the stuff what I know myself. I will say this though, I take my hat off to every coach across the country, because it's a tough old game. It's a tough old game, and if you don't get a really good fighter who's earning good money, then it's near enough impossible to just be a full-time coach and commit yourself to it without doing anything else. And that means that physically you'd have to be doing another job, or you'd have to do other coaching in terms of personal training and stuff to make ends meet. And physically it's a very tough job. I mean, my hands and elbows and shoulders are rolled off all the time. So yeah, every professional coach deserves the break and deserves a fighter who gets to the stage where they can sort of earn a good living out of it, because it's a tough old sport.
Yeah. And finally, if you had a message, what would your message be to anybody watching this who would like to get into coaching?
To get into coaching, I mean, just be around as much as you can around experienced people. Don't be scared to ask questions. And the main thing is you can't beat experience. So just be in the gym, ghost people, listen to what they say, take the lessons on board, because there's no greater education than just being around. I mean, when I was 17, 18, I was working a job delivering beer, and just round the corner from my depot was the Phoenix camp. So Billy Graham was head coach there, and at the time there was Carl Thompson, Maurice Coe, Ensley Bingham, Ricky Hatton had just turned pro, Michael Brodie was there, and I just used to go in there and eat me lunch, and I'd just go in, literally, wouldn't even speak to people sometimes. I'd just go in there, get me sandwiches, sit there and just watch the training take place. And I literally learned about how to be a body puncher and the importance of your positioning and your balance and the angles of the shot, and how the little shifts to one way or the other can make a difference between the punch landing, and how important it is about you offsetting your opponent's balance and the little nudges, the positioning of your head in the pocket. I learned all that stuff not by being educated about it in a boxing gym while I was training. I learned about it, sat eating sandwiches, watching Billy Graham coach all his fighters. So you can't underestimate the importance of us being around those scenarios, and how much you learn and the knowledge you get off it.
Thank you very much for your time, Jamie. I really appreciate you joining me on this interview.
No problem at all.
Thank you.